Uhuru, everyone. Uhuru means freedom in Swahili. My name is Olofin Ikemba, and this is the third webinar on Black August 2019, themed Africa for Africans, those at home and abroad, fly the red, black, and green. And as I said, my name is Olofin Ikemba, and I am the managing editor of the Burning Spear newspaper. And before we begin today's program, I definitely want to salute our comrade Omowale Kefing, who was a longtime editor and the strongest advocate for the Burning Spear newspaper, who passed away on Monday, July 29, 2019. We're dedicating this broadcast and our entire Black August campaign to our beloved comrade Kefing, who is a revolutionary giant whose heroic stance sets the standard for all of us to emulate. And if you haven't seen the excerpted interview between myself and Comrade Kefing on the significance of the spear, you definitely want to check that out. And we will have the chat moderators post that link below to the video below. But in a short while, I'll be joined by Luwezi Kinshasa, who is the Secretary General of the African Socialist International. The African Socialist International is an organization made up of African people located virtually on every continent, dedicated to overturning the conditions faced by African people worldwide. And that condition is, of course, colonialism, which is defined as the foreign and alien domination of a people for the purpose of economic exploitation and political advantage, or to strip a people of all human and civil rights and to rule without regard to law. And if you, that comes from the Uhuru buzzwords that is on page 3 of the Burning Spear newspaper. So you can find that, those definitions on the Uhuru buzzwords on the printed version of the Burning Spear newspaper. So you definitely want to get your copy of the Burning Spear newspaper. It is $25 for an annual subscription, and you can get it at burningspearmarketplace.com. That is burningspearmarketplace.com. But as you probably realize, the theme of today's webinar comes from Marcus Garvey, who was the leader and founder of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, which is a UNIA ACL for short. That was the precursor of the African Socialist International, created by Chairman Omali Yeshitela. We are the 21st century Garveyites, uniting African people no matter where we're located on the planet Earth. Africa, the land and hope and promise, the land of hope and promise for Negro peoples of the world, was the headline of an article in the Negro World newspaper. And the Negro World was published by Marcus Garvey in 1918 as the official news organ of the UNIA ACL, distributing hundreds of thousands of newspapers on a regular basis. The Burning Spear newspaper, as the official organ of the African People's Socialist Party, revived and continued the legacy of the Negro World newspaper for 50 years, serving as the voice of the International African Revolution since 1968. It's been instrumental in organizing black communities here in the US, Europe, the Caribbean, and on the continent of Africa itself, informing them with the revolutionary theory of African internationalism, which is the practical theory of the Uhuru movement and the African working class overall, no matter where we're located. And you can visit theburningspear.com for more information on the Burning Spear newspaper and to get your revolutionary analysis, African internationalist analysis. But to draw more parallels between the ASI and the UNIA, I want to read an article from the August 2018 Spear, which was dedicated entirely to Marcus Garvey. And the particular article I'll be reading from is written by a special guest who we'll hear from today. And that is none other than Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa. And the article is headlined, "The African People's Socialist Party is developing the true vision of Garvey's UNIA that relayed the significance of Garvey, the ASI, and our 7th Congress, which happened in October of 2018. So the moderators will be posting the link to the online version of the article in the chat so you can read along with us. But I'll be reading from the printed version of the August 2018 Spear. So again, this headline is "The African People's Socialist Party is developing the true vision of Garvey's UNIA," written by Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa of the African Socialist International. It reads, "In this most volatile crisis situation the capitalist world is in, the oppressed nations continue to irreversibly push an end to the relationship that has binded us to oppressor white nations against our will for the last 600 years. The Seventh Congress of the African People's Socialist Party is the most strategic political gathering that one can find inside the African nation and around the world. This is precisely because it is the only one that addresses the imperialist crisis with a clear intention of defeating the whole system at its foundation. Thus, this is where the clearest direction and trajectory of the African revolutionary struggles will be decided. It is in this Congress that African membership will adopt Chairman Omali Yeshitela's latest political report to the Seventh Congress and will elect the highest leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, the chair, and its central committee. It's also where white forces in solidarity with the African nation and solidarity among all colonized people's struggles of the world will find their best expressions. Achieving black power, unification of the African nation in a liberated and unified Africa through revolution is the Congress trajectory, even as African politics on the continent and beyond revolve around neo-colonial electoral process and wars. Africans from throughout the world will converge in St. Louis, Missouri in October 2018 for this historical meeting of the leadership of the African working class. It's not unlike the first UNIA convention in New York City in 1920 that set a new anti-colonial movement standard that threatened to dismantle the whole edifice under which this system of parasitic capitalism rests. APSP carrying out and developing Garvey's vision today. The African petty bourgeoisie cannot develop Garvey's vision. The vanguard of the African petty bourgeoisie is inside the government in a balkanized neo-colonial Africa. The neo-colonialist rearguard is one that postures inside the African liberation movement, known today as PanAfricanism in its various trends. As Chairman Omali Yeshitela in his political report to the Seventh Congress of the African People's Socialist Party stated, however, our party is not only the advanced attachment of the African working class, but as we have said before, we are the vanguard of the entire African national revolution. We have accepted the responsibility of liberating Africa and the entire forcibly dispersed African nation that suffers under the cruel weight of colonialism everywhere. And that is on page 16. We are doing exactly what Garvey was set to do and accomplish: mobilize and organize the African working class and poor peasants worldwide for revolutionary liberation and unification of the African nation. That is what this October Congress in St. Louis, Missouri is about. It is the embodiment of one continuous African liberation movement with one final objective. It does not matter where we're located. That is the recognition of who we are as African people. In a report from the New York chapter of the UNIA ACL, at the first International Convention of the Negro Peoples of the World in 1920, New York delegate Miss Sarah Branch stated, "We are tired of being called Negroes. We are not Negroes, we are Africans. We want to be called Africans. God gave us the name Ethiopians, and we want to be called Ethiopians or Africans. Negro is simply a pet name that the white man gave us when he went to Africa and stole our foreparents. Let us all in this convention with one voice cry out, we will not be called Negroes any longer, but Africans." Omali Yeshitela Political Report to the Seventh Congress, which was on page 92. The history of Africa did not start in the Berlin Conference, so it can't be defined by colonial borders Berlin has created for colonial purposes. Every struggle of Africans must include the same beginning and its development around the world. The struggle of resistance in Nigeria cannot be limited by what happened in Nigeria alone, because our oppression did not start with Frederick Lugard's creation of Nigeria. The consciousness of struggles in Nigeria or anywhere across the African nation must include the Haitian Revolution, Nat Turner's resistance, the Great Marcus Garvey movement, the rise and fall of the Patrice Lumumba-led anti-colonial movement in the Congo, the Algerian struggle for independence, the Aborigine struggles in Australia, New Zealand, New Caledonia, etc. That growing highest level of consciousness is African internationalism. It says that all black people are Africans and all other non-black people can be a part of the African nation if they are committed to the mission of the black proletariat and commit national suicide in order of being part of the black nation. Every genuine African organization must speak to the question of the African nation. This is another significant aspect of the African People's Socialist Party in carrying out the legacy of Garvey. UNIA was the vanguard of the African struggle of its time, and so is the APSP today, the African People's Socialist Party. It sets the new criteria for what it means to be a genuine national liberation movement, regardless if one is a socialist or not. One must recognize the existence of the organic African nation and the strategic necessity to organize as one people in one continuum movement across the planet for a black power state. The African petty bourgeoisie have joined hostile and parasitic organizations which tied up Africans to all kinds of foreign alien organizations such as the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, the United Nations, UN, the Francophone Commonwealth, or to foreign corporations who are not only part of the economic fabric which fleece the African nation of all of its blood life, but are consciously opposed to a united Africa and African people around the world. UNIA, the forerunner of the APSP's dual power institutions. Garvey's leadership saw the realization of anti-colonial institutions of productions and distributions owned collectively through the UNIA and African Communities League, ACL. When one thinks of Garvey, Black Star Line comes to mind. This idea of doing for self and self-reliance is what characterizes the APSP from its inception. We have united the political and the economic fronts. The statement, "we are preparing to govern," is really loaded with tangible programs that everyone can see. The party established a non-profit entity, the African People's Education and Defense Fund, APEDF, to host community programs in defense of the human and civil rights of the African community. APEDF today encompasses Uhuru Furniture and Collectibles, One Africa, One Nation Marketplace, and other economic programs of the party created over the past 3 or more decades. We have built the dynamic Uhuru houses with their Aquaba halls in St. Petersburg, Florida, Oakland, California, and now in St. Louis, Missouri. We created Black Star Industries that includes Uhuru Foods and Pies, Planet Uhuru Apparel, the African Independence Workforce Program, Burning Spear Publications, and other institutions that comprise the foundation of a liberated African working class economy, which is an expression of dual and contending power. African petty bourgeoisie opposed to the liberation and unification of Africa and the African nation. In his time, Garvey had to contend with various petty bourgeois politics deprived of state power. W.E.B. Du Bois is the most known representative of that social force, and George Patmore is being the other known veneered Pan-Africanist. The imperialists engineered downfall of Garvey in alliance with the Communist Party of USA and African petty bourgeoisie opened the way for the rise of Pan-Africanism in Africa. Du Bois and Patmore are key historical beneficiaries of the importance of Marcus Garvey and of the imprisonment, of Marcus Garvey and destruction of his UNIA anti-colonial dual power institutions. These two were to play a role in influencing Kwame Nkrumah's capture of political power in Ghana from 1957 to 1966. Nonviolence, neutralism, positive action, and parliamentarianism, politics of Nkrumah, were announced first by Du Bois and Patmore, political initiatives aimed at reforming imperialism in Africa. Du Bois and Patmore chose not to fight the British colonial army, which, when rebaptized, turned into Ghana's neo-colonial army. The same army being the center of military power of the African bourgeoisie, would overthrow Nkrumah in February of 1966 with the massive support of the U.S. and British rulers. Du Bois and Patmore represented the African petty bourgeoisie and the Ghanaian neo-colonial army that overthrew Nkrumah's rule. The struggles under the leadership of the APSP are the struggles that happen in the area of neo-colonial state power or white power in blackface state power, which dominates our lives across Africa, the Caribbean, etc. This is where the generals, colonels, majors, and intelligence officers control the apparatus of state coercion that kills African people daily to maintain the status quo. The Organization of African Unity, OAU, is the greatest portrayal of the African petty bourgeois leaders. They rejected the road to a minimum collective power with Nkrumah's vision of African Union government, one African market, and common foreign policy and defense. OAU is a manifestation of Pan-Africanist opportunism, which is anything one wants except a united black power state under the leadership of the African working class. Pan-Africanism does not respond to the long-term strategic goals of the African nation, but opportunistic class ambitions and goals of individuals of the African petty bourgeoisie and their thirst for colonial power. Victory to the African nation. Build the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party, Uhuru. So that was an article by Comrade Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa, who we have with us today. And we know that the only group on the planet Earth that will continue the legacy of the African nation is the African Socialist International. We're involved in very serious practical work, as you read in this article, in an effort to unite and liberate the African nation. But of course, this will take all of your help. And tonight we have a goal of raising $250 that will go towards keeping the spear burning and funding our Mafundi Lake-sponsored prisoner program, which was named after a heroic African political prisoner who built a powerful resistance movement from inside the Atmore Home incarceration camp in Alabama and shipped subscriptions to our sisters and brothers behind bars for free. And that's fairly costly for us to do so, but it is a necessity that our sisters and brothers behind bars are connected to organized political life and analysis because they are a significant part of the African nation that we'll discuss today. So I want to now introduce our special guests as I have indicated earlier. It is now my great honor to turn it over to my leadership in the African Socialist International and perhaps one of the greatest articulators and evangelists of our theory of African internationalism, consolidating our nation in Europe, the continent of Africa itself, and everywhere we're located. So Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa, thank you for coming on to the Spears webinar today. Uhuru. Uhuru, SG Luwezi. You muted. You can unmute if you were there. We had Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa with us.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. All right.
Yeah, I forgot to unmute myself, so I was talking to the phone.
Okay.
Welcome, it's a great privilege and a great honor for me to be in this webinar. Thank you for inviting me.
Uhuru. Thank you for coming on. Absolutely.
Yes,
and to begin, I wanted to see if you had anything further to contribute to the article that we just read from.
Well, I don't think I have much to add to that. Mm-hmm. Concretely, what we do, to implement the vision of Garvey today, and being a party, and it's really what everyone can do. Everyone has to live like Garvey, as we just say, live like Kevin or Mowale. So the base any African who is listening can do, if you haven't joined yet, that's what you should join. That's where all things start. We need you to be in the party so we can implement the vision, the program, the strategy of the party. That's basically what I can say. We are ready. We're just waiting for you to join.
Absolutely. Definitely want to join the African People's Socialist Party. That is apsphuru.org/join. And be a part of this movement that we are the 21st century Garveyites. If you were talking about how much you want to live like Garvey, then this is the place for you to be. So you definitely want to join the African People's Socialist Party. So thank you for that, SG. And as you know, SG for everyone is short for Secretary General. So that's what I'll be referring to him as. And as you know, the 99th anniversary of the red, black, and green flag was on this past Tuesday. And can you explain the significance of our flag as it relates to the African nation?
Yes, this flag is very significant because today every African seems to have a flag of sorts. When you walk on the street of London, you look at the cars driven by black people, and you will see they all have some kind of flag. Usually it's a flag where they came from, where their parents were born, and something like that. The flag of of Marcus Garvey, the red, black, and green is not the flag where you were born or where you came from. It's the freedom flag. It's the flag that we need to raise on the top hills of Africa, as Marcus Garvey said, because none of the flags we have is a freedom flag. Most of the flags we have, if not all of them, are flags of the African bourgeoisie, of the flags of compromise.
Right.
And those flags, instead of unifying black people, those flags separate black people because these the island in the Caribbean, where I'm from, that's my flag. These the flag of part of where I'm from, that's in Africa, and so on. We go these, thousand flags, so to speak, which we, do not really mean anything, and none of them reflect power. None of those flags command respect in the world for black people, but the flag of the UNIA, that was a democratic flag, because there was all these African delegates coming from various places in the world who met in New York. I think it was the Madison Garden. And they voted on that. They chose that one. Africans have a say. When you think in the late 19th or early 20s, last century, Africans everywhere, we had no right to vote. Most of us were under colonial, direct white colonial domination. But that was the only place where Africans met and discussed, defined, why black, why green, why red, and that flag has been also the source of most of flag history around Africa, starting from Libya to Kenya. You see a variation of that flag. Sometimes what they do, they remove the black, they replace the black with the yellow one. But we know most of those flags, that's where they got it from. They got it from the powerful anti-colonial movement, international African anti-colonial movement, created and led by Marcus Garvey, and that was the flag. That was the flag that unifies Africans from various places. Instead of having many flags, no, we are one people. This is our flag, and this is the freedom flag. We fight for Africa to be free and united, so we can be powerful and respected. So you can see from the very beginning, they want you to have a flag that protects our power, as opposed to a flag that protects powerlessness. Just a tiny place somewhere in Africa, and mostly, if you call young people, you put all these 55 flags from Africa. Take that in the primary school. You can say this is a flag of some city somewhere. Some kids will believe you. As opposed to flags of countries and things like that. So basically, to say the flag is significant. And since also the UNIA was an organization rooted amongst the working class, you can say it is also the flag of the African workers too, because the organization was rooted in the African working class, as opposed to Pan-Africanist movement, which was rooted amongst the African bourgeoisie. And this was not their flag. But today, everybody gets that flag, including the Pan-Africanists, and they say this is their flag too. And they add confusion into that, when in reality, Pan-Africanists attacked Marcus Garvey, which means they attacked his flag too, So, and that's the flag we need to promote, to allow Africans to know about it. Most Africans don't know about the flag. I bet you if you go to many places around the world, around Africa, you'll be surprised. You still have Africans who don't know Marcus Garvey, and we don't know the red and the black and green. So the work we do is really significant to win people to black people to unity. So we can fight as one and achieve black power. So, and this is the flag for it. Yes, well.
Thank you for that. And as you stated, about the Pan Africanism, I was going to ask you a question about that concerning that in your article where you stated Pan-Africanism does not respond to the long-term strategic goals of the African nation, but the opportunistic class ambitions and goals of individuals of the African petty bourgeoisie and their thirst for colonial power. So you kind of went over how they attacked Garvey, but can you explain more on your position of Pan-Africanism here for the audience?
You can see when you consider the key moments, the decisive moments in history, when every decision that's taken against movements at a critical time could derail, our march towards freedom. You will see people like Dubois in the early 20s. His participation in the attacks against the Garvey movement played a critical role because the United States worked with Dubois, worked with the Communist Party, but particularly with the Pan-Africanists. We saw Dubois going around the world seeking for help from the imperialists, meeting with the president of the United States, seeking help from the president of France, going to Belgium, Portugal, all these places to seek support from the same white power responsible for oppression at, not just at that time, but historically, and to go and seek for, assistance. It's basically you saying, you're safe with me. So basically what he was fighting for, a reform, and reform of direct white power. When you reform direct white power, what you get indirect white power. So you can say, you can see the itinerary of Dubois from the attack on Garvey to his participation to the 1945 conference in Manchester, to his work with Kwame Nkrumah, the strategy that he laid out with George Padmore, and another Pan-Africanists who attacked Garvey. You can see they've been really consistent that what they wanted is to reform colonialism. And if your job, your program is to reform colonialism, it just means that what you're looking for is to maintain the foundation. Because when you reform colonialism, it means the foundation is still the same. Because neo-colonialism is still colonialism. It's still imperialism. And we know capitalism at its birth is imperialism attack on Africa and the rest of the people of the world, basically. That's how imperialism came into being, And so if you want to change our conditions, and if you want to solve the problems of black people, you don't fight to reform it. I'm not saying we oppose to reform, but if your main program, your main objective, your ultimate objective is to reform imperialism, then you will just change the form imperialism takes. Like in a place like South Africa, where you used to have the colonial administration run by settler colonialists. Now it's not run by settler colonialists. It's run by African bourgeoisie. But it's still settler colonialism, but in the black face. So Dubois and the Pan-Africanists played that role against Garvey. And they played that role also in 1945 when they defined their strategy to fight direct colonialism. When in China and other places, the Vietnamese were fighting to overthrow imperialism. Dubois and Padmore, basically leading Pan-Africanists at the time, they worked with Nkrumah and other leaders emerging from Africa to have Pan-Africanism as the main strategy. So they assumed no fighting because they were peaceful. and which is it's just beyond comprehension that you can fight imperialism by being peaceful when the bourgeoisie, the white bourgeoisie, is the most violent social force on the planet in the history of mankind, and they assume by that also not only the bourgeoisie will work with them because it's peaceful struggle. When the bourgeoisie is never peaceful when it comes to the African working class, it's true the bourgeoisie can have that deal with the African PD bourgeoisie, as long as the deal is to maintain colonialism, but in another form, they did that. So that was the 1945 and the implementation of the vision in the struggle in Africa. So people like Patrice Lumumba in the Congo, people like Robert Sobukwe in South Africa, and many other people were inspired by Pan-Africanism as it was expressed itself in practice under the leadership of Kwame Nkrumah. But what it did, it didn't prepare the masses of African workers to fight imperialism and to fight the African petty bourgeoisie, because it was clear that when imperialism gave power to the African petty bourgeoisie in Ghana or in the Congo, and people like Patrice Lumumba wanted to step out of what he perceived as a status quo. But because it was Pan-Africanist, it did not anticipate that he would have to fight imperialism, so he didn't prepare the African working class and the poor peasants to fight against imperialism. So the masses were quite disarmed, so to speak, against imperialism. So in the decisive moments, Pan-Africanism contributed to the downfall of Nkrumah himself, but first of downfall of Patrice Lumumba and his assassination later on, because of the whole approach of Pan-Africanism was a class approach, African bourgeoisie class approach, peaceful approach towards imperialism. And you can also take the OAU, the foundation of the AAU. Nkrumah himself, he assumed that you can unify Africa from above with the head of African state. When in reality, the head of African state, the only thing they were interested in is to be in power, to become president or prime ministers. And people to get rid of imperialism, to unify genuinely Africa, that was not their concern. Their concern is to be in power and to satisfy their own class aspiration and individual aspirations, but in alliance with imperialism. So colonialism moved to neo-colonialism, just the same thing, but the administration is being handed over to black people, the African people bourgeoisie. Just the Africans, the same one who just a couple of years ago used to say they are opposed to imperialism. But when you look at the strategy, what they were asking all along is to reform imperialism. And you can examine the history of any petty bourgeois leader, you will see the same thing. Study Mandela, he was a compromise. Study Robert Mugabe, despite taking arms against the British settlers in Zimbabwe, but you will see compromise. Lancaster House, for example, 1979, Mugabe compromised with the British colonialism. You can see that everywhere. That's the history. But strategically, we understand that imperialism must be destroyed at its foundation, which is colonialism, domination of the African nation and other colonized nations, but particularly African nation. If you want to free Africa, if you want to achieve power, if you want to build the African nation, you go change the relationship for power. And you cannot do it without destroying imperialism at its foundation, without achieving strategic power in a relationship of power with imperialism, and the Pan-Africanists can't do that. They haven't done it. Every time they took the side of opportunism, from Dubois to Nyerere, in Addis Ababa during this conference to launch what they used to call the Organization of African Unity, which became the AU, the African Union, today. At every time you will see opportunism. So that's what we are. We know, we're convinced. History is there to testify. They are unable to do that. That's not their mission. The mission to strategically destroy imperialism. That's the mission of the African working class, and there is no doubt about it. Yes, well.
Oh, thank you for that historical background. And just to say that you see the red, black, and green flag all over the place being described as a flag of Pan-Africanism. And so now you know that that wasn't the case. Pan-Africanists were, from its inception, opposed to Garvey's movement, the UNIA, for the struggle to free African people and to consolidate the African nation. And as S.G. Luwezi laid out, they will always betray the African working class for their own selfish interests. And so definitely appreciate the historical background on Pan-Africanism. So we make it clear what is the way forward for African people, and that is the defeat and total overthrow of white power imperialism. So I just want to ask you one last question, Secretary Luwezi. And as this past Wednesday, the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement celebrated the courageous response of the African working class in Ferguson, Missouri, after the police assassination of Mike Brown in August 2014. And 3 years later in London, where you're located, or 3 years earlier, sorry, in London, where you're located, the people rose up against the police after the assassination of Mark Dugan. Why is it important that we uphold these acts of resistance rather than condemn them?
Yes, wherever there is oppression, that's the saying goes like this: wherever there is oppression, there's resistance. And that's really makes sense. And in Britain, in August, I think it was August of the 4th, I think it was, or the 6th, a young man with the name of Mark Dugan was shot by the police. He was gunned down by the police, just like Mark Brown. A few years later, he was gunned down by the police. And as usual, the government underestimates the force of the masses, because the masses are the one who make history. And there was a demonstration outside at the police station, and the police, as usual, behaved with arrogance toward the masses. And that just it was clear to the people that something has to be done. There must be a price paid for shooting Mark Dugan, and that was in North London, Tottenham, and the Africans rebelled, and they start, burning down that part of the city, targeting some of the buildings, and before you know it, everywhere throughout London, the African youth join in. Every single town in London, there was some kind of rebellion. And you can say, if your neighbor is rebellious, then today is your turn. And tomorrow is the next time. So it was like socialist competition. No one wants to be left behind, And it was a tremendous experience, just to see what the people can do, and to see the state being on the defensive. They have to mobilize police forces throughout UK, throughout this country, bring them in London. For the first time, I saw police like from far places, like Wales, whoops, that's probably with a certain accent, and you can see the fear in the faces of the police. Whenever they saw Africans scattering, and the police couldn't go on the offensive. They just, they stood still with the dogs, and sometimes they retreated, but they couldn't go on the offensive. because you had an impression that black people were coming from everywhere, from just in a matter of few seconds you see just black masses everywhere, and everyone doing something, and you see the shops, the parasitic merchants shutting their shops, closing their shops early, anticipating there might be troubles in about 2 or 3 hours, and they will close down, not close, they will close their shops, but what was missing, it was in basically direction, a political consciousness, that we are involved in the struggle against the ruling class, against the bourgeoisie. And rebellions do not last forever. Rebellions, might be 2 or 3 or 4 days, maybe a week, and then it disappear. And then you might not even recognize, what happens like a week ago. Everything seems to have gone back to normal, and the bourgeoisie now start using the videos, looking for woody words, the campaign of slanders, starters. These African youth was caught in the video, going in a shop, taking trainers or bottles of waters and things like that. And there was no organized forces to side with the African working class. We were basically the only one try to inject organization and consciousness to the people to say this response, has to be developed through organization. Because the bourgeoisie, after the rebellions, basically is going to respond. And of course, since the days of rebellion, the bourgeoisie has responded, and gentrification is a part of the response. If you go to those places, those neighborhoods, where the resistance was really stronger, you will see gentrification, buildings being knocked off, people being dispersed around the UK. They're sending people from London to places like as far as Liverpool, Northland, or to Scotland. African community being dispersed throughout the UK. It's almost impossible to be in major towns in UK and not to see Africans who are there as a result or consequence of gentrification, which is partly a response, particularly its acceleration, I might say, a response to the rebellion, to the resistance to African people. And it's really important to remember that, to commemorate that, because we have the power. If you saw what the Africans did during those rebellions, we've got the power, and the power has to be unleashed through organization. It can't be just spontaneous, because spontaneous it means there is no clear programs. The masses are fighting for. They're doing things based on their instinct or based on a limited understanding they might have, etc., things like that. But through organization, then we understand the revolution is a process. And if the masses rebel, and we know the rebellion can be used to advance the interests of the African revolution, and that's why basically the rebellion in London really was historical. It was just, I can't tell you, he just changed a lot of things for that year. If you're looking for the power of people, you will have seen the power of the people, what the people can do. So that's something I can say, and that's why Mike Brown was also important, because what the rebellion in London did, or the resistance in Ferguson did, he informed the world that not only of our presence in the UK or in the US, but the fighting, the African working class fight, was central stage again, because we have not seen the African working class fighting, resisting in that fashion for almost 2 weeks. The whole world saw it, and that resistance really inspired a lot of people. But definitely, he's responsible for things like the Black Marcus Life, things like that. Is the struggle of the poor African working class that gave rise to all that and inspired all African people around the world. We saw people around France, Belgium, everywhere, South Africa, standing in solidarity with the struggle of Africans in Ferguson. So it's really a game changer, And the African People's Socialist Party is the only one, to have united with the struggle in Ferguson in a strategic way, not like the African people bourgeoisie, which is the difference. And I'm glad that the box is there and we're developing and we're growing stronger. So it's really glad to be part of that.
Thank you so much for that, and I appreciate the simple dialectic that you pointed out earlier. Where there's oppression, there's resistance, and so that's what happened in London. That's what happened here in the U.S. In Ferguson, and also really appreciate you for laying out how important that was to the world and how the African People's Socialist Party as an organization is the only way forward. As we can see, we've created so many practical institutions in St. Louis that's really transforming the climate there. And so we have the Black Power Blueprint base there. We have the New Uhuru House and just so many other projects happening in St. Louis. And so I definitely appreciate you for pointing that out. So like Secretary General Luwezi said, join the African People's Socialist Party. That's the only way forward for African people. So, as you know, the Burning Spear newspaper has shipped free to any prisoner who requested since the tabloid edition of our paper, which launched in 1969, and we currently ship to over 500 prisoners. And this month, Black August, the Burning Spear newspaper is campaigning to raise $5,000 to cover the cost of another year of printing and shipping to our brothers and sisters behind the walls. And I just wanted to say that we did get a few contributions in that is going towards that overall 5,000. Tonight we're just raising 250, and I just want to salute our editor-in-chief and director of our department, Akile Nai, who donated $10. So salute to Director Akile. I want to salute the Northern Regional Representative, Comrade Nana Yaw, who donated $20. So salute to Comrade Nana Yaw, and the $20 from a Sufaya Musa. Thank you so much, Sophia, for the $20 you contributed to the Mafundi Lake Sponsor Prisoner Fund. So we also have a donation of $5 from KC Mackey in St. Louis. So salute KC Mackey for $5. So right now we have $195 left to raise, and I know we can do that. That's a very small amount in order to make this vision of Garveyism and to continue the struggle for the liberation of African people. That is a small amount to contribute. So our goal is to transform these incarceration camps into universities of African internationalism and unite African people wherever we're located. So with that stated, Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa of the African Socialist International, I definitely want to thank you for being on with us this evening. Uhuru.
Yes, thank you for inviting me. Great privilege, so I appreciate that. Welcome.
All right. So you can check out the analysis unfolding in Europe and Africa from Luwezi Kinshasa by reading his column Kinshasa International every month in the Burning Spear newspaper. And this analysis of the crisis of white power imperialism and the future of the African nation can't be found anywhere else except the Burning Spear newspaper. So you can get your copy today at burningspearmarketplace.com, or you can check us out at theburningspear.com for your revolutionary analysis of events happening in the world. And like I said, I just want to thank those people who donated, and that was Director Akile, the editor-in-chief of the Burning Spear newspaper, Nana Yaw, who is the Northern representative of the African People's Socialist Party, $20, Sophia Musa, $20, and KC Mackey, $5. And we also got some new contributions that came in. We have $25 from Comrade Kota in Philadelphia. Salute Kota, Uhuru. We have $20 from Sandy in Seattle. Uhuru, Sandy, thank you so much. And $25 from Comrade Lisa Watson in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So definitely want to appreciate Lisa for that $25 contribution towards the Mafundi Lake Sponsored Prisoner Program. And just special thanks to Comrade Kota for the $25 and Geraldine for donating midweek. She donated $100 to the Mafundi Lake Sponsored Prisoner Program when like there was no webinar happening. She just did it. She saw it, and that's what everybody needs to do. Just go ahead and just donate it, and we will be very much closer to having the type of institutions that we need in order to forward the revolution of the African Revolution for the liberation of African people. And so I don't have the total. We have 10, 20, 20, that's 50. Then we have 55, 25, 20. So we're going to get that total to you. And in the meantime, you can definitely continue to contribute to help us reaching our goal. So I just want to thank those who donated again, and thank you for keeping the spear burning. And so we're going to go into some announcements, and then we're going to get back into thanking those who have donated to the Mafundi Lake Sponsored Prisoner Program. So the spear sales competition is underway, and if you're interested in competing, visit www.theburningSpear.com/spear-sales-competition. That's the way that you enter into the spear sales competition, and the moderators will post that link below. And be sure to include pictures of yourself out in the community selling the spear, because we only have 2 weeks left for the competition. So if you really want those prizes, you need to enroll in the Burning Spear spear sales competition. It's really competitive, and the winners will receive a Burning Spear canvas bag, a poster of the 1982 World Tribunal of Reparations led by the African People's Socialist Party, a 50th anniversary t-shirt, and a free bundle of the September 2019 spear, as well as your article in the October 2019 spear and on the burningspear.com. So those are really tremendous prizes. You don't want to miss out on it. Like I said, it is the burningspear.com/spear-sales-competition. So definitely enroll, get your work on, get out there and transform your communities with the Burning Spear newspaper. So next week, Thursday, August 27th, Fight Like Haiti, the Great Haitian Revolution, featuring Comrade Olofin Ikemba, who is the administrative assistant for Chairman Amala Yeshatela. This will be a dynamic discussion on the Haitian Revolution that you don't want to miss. So, like, I can't really stress enough how much you want to be a part of that discussion. It's going to be extremely dynamic. Comrade Alikia knows a lot about the struggle in Haiti from the African internationalist perspective. So you definitely want to tune into that. And finally, the Burning Spear is looking to fill numerous staff positions. To apply, you can visit theburningspear.com, and at the top, click on Get Involved. We're looking to fill positions here, a part of the Burning Spear staff. And so definitely want to be a part of this newspaper, making change in the African community. There's no other there's no other newspaper that offers this type of analysis to the African working class and represents and speaks in our voice. So definitely want to be a part of this team. So I also want to thank our webinar coordinator, Kyle Weiss, who donated $10. So salute to Kyle. And so we have a total of $135, and we need $115. So you want to help us reach that goal. Like I said, it's the burningspear.com/donate. And I really want to see if anyone wants to go ahead and make that. I mean, as low as $5, $100, all the way up to $115. So we definitely want people to contribute to this, because as we said, we're trying to develop the vision of Marcus Garvey. We are developing the vision of Marcus Garvey, let me say that. And we are doing, we have experienced just a whirlwind of successes in the party, and the Burning Spear newspaper is the news organ of the African People's Socialist Party. So we definitely want to support these institutions, these Black Power institutions that are ours, that help forward the strategy of the African working class. No other organization does that on the face of the earth except for the African People's Socialist Party, and let that be made abundantly clear. And so definitely contribute to our goal of $115. And you can always donate. Like I said, the burningspear.com/donate is at the bottom of the screen. You can see it. But that is all for tonight, comrades, and I will see you all next week. As I said, there will be a discussion with Comrade Alika Ngoma, who is the administrative assistant for. All right, before we adjourn, we have $5 from Comrade Jackson Hollingsworth here in St. Pete. So salute Jackson, and now we need $110. So definitely contribute to that $110 by visiting theburningspear.com/donate. And you definitely want to be a part of this campaign that is going to make history and really transform our communities and unite African people everywhere we are. So I will see you next week on our webinar with Comrade Alikia. And like I said, you just don't want to miss it at all. It's going to be dynamic. It's going to be absolutely great. So until next week, comrades, thank you for tuning in, and uhuru.